The dust bar sat at the heart of Virelon Outpost, a trading station orbiting a dying red star whose light barely reached the polished metal corridors. Ships from across the galaxy came and went. Freighters, patrol vessels, smugglers' rigs, each dropping off travelers with different customs, scents, and stories. Inside the dust bar, the air shimmered with the hum of old machines, soft alien music, and the quiet tension that only a true neutral zone could create. Mazath, the bar's six-eyed owner, stood behind the curved counter, drying a glass with long, rubbery fingers. He had seen hundreds of species pass through, but only recently had humans become part of that crowd. They were still new to the galactic accord, accepted but not fully trusted. Their emotions ran high, their instincts strange, and their history chaotic. So when the door slid open with a hiss and Captain Elias Granger stepped inside with his crew, Mazath's eyes narrowed just a little. Elias was tall for a human, dressed in worn navy blue ship leathers with a patch from the UHS Resolute stitched on one arm. His crew followed. Kira, the sharp-eyed engineer, Juno, a calm ex-medic with a scar under her eye, and Briggs, the communications officer with a voice always a bit too loud. They took a table in the back, nodded politely to the locals, and ordered drinks. At first, everything stayed quiet. A group of soft-furred Talons sang low songs near the center. A Lauren trader bartered with a holographic assistant at the bar's edge. The humans kept to themselves, sipping and smiling, but tension ran beneath the surface. Mazath noticed how other patrons glanced at the newcomers, whispering in alien tongues. One didn't need a translator to read suspicion. It happened not long after the drinks arrived. A Gralic War veteran, broad-shouldered with silver-tipped scales and a dented chest plate, staggered toward the counter, already reeking of fermented slore juice. His eyes locked on a small Trelawney trader who was barely over 4 feet tall and dressed in ceremonial silk. The Trelawney stood frozen, wide-eyed as the Gralic began to growl in his own language, slurring insults that made nearby patrons look away. The air grew tight. No one moved. This was the unspoken rule of the dust bar, peace above all else. No species dared break it, not openly. Still, the Gralic pressed forward, his voice rising, his claws twitching dangerously close to the trader's shoulder. The Trelawney trembled but said nothing, his eyes darting toward Mazath, then toward the silent crowd. The Talon singers had stopped their melody. The Lauren paused mid-negotiation. Mazath's many eyes blinked, but he did not move. If he stepped in, he would risk turning the bar into a war zone. Then, from the back table, a chair scraped the floor. Elias had stood up. He didn't speak, not yet. His crew looked at him, then at the scene near the bar. Kira's hand moved slowly toward her belt, not for a weapon but ready for something. Juno's eyes narrowed, reading the room, and Briggs slowly put down his drink, his expression hardening. The Gralic hadn't noticed them yet. He was too busy shoving the Trelawney, who stumbled backward and hit a table with a sharp gasp. The bar fell into silence again, but this silence was heavier. It wasn't just about fear anymore. It was waiting. Mazath watched Elias take a step forward, and one of his arms reached under the bar, hovering near a silent alarm, but then he paused. He didn't press it. Instead, he studied the humans, as if trying to understand something not written in the Accord files. Elias's gaze shifted between the trader, the Gralic, and the watching crowd. His jaw tensed. In that moment, something unspoken passed through his crew. They'd seen this before, maybe not in this galaxy, but in back-alley docks, earthside dives, and deep space outposts. A line had been crossed, and the question now wasn't if they'd act, but when. Mazath felt it too. Something was about to happen, and for the first time in years, the dust bar was about to find out what humans really did, when rules failed and silence became too loud. Captain Elias Granger stood perfectly still, his hand resting lightly on the table's edge, eyes locked on the growing chaos at the bar. The tension in the dust bar felt like a taut wire ready to snap. He could feel every stare pressing in on him, not just from his crew, but from the dozens of alien patrons waiting to see what the humans would do. Kira whispered under her breath, "We can't just sit here." Juno didn't speak but had already shifted in her seat, alert and ready. Briggs clenched his jaw, his usual grin replaced by something cold and focused. Elias didn't answer immediately. He stared ahead, but his mind was racing. He thought about Earth, about centuries of conflict and resistance, about how humanity had fought. Not always wisely, not always cleanly, but how they had always stood when it mattered. From back-alley scuffles in old frontier towns to defiant resistance in the face of far greater powers, humans had a long history of choosing the harder path. The rules of the Galactic Accord echoed in his mind. Non-interference, no violence in neutral zones, all disputes handled by councils and quiet negotiations. But this wasn't a council room. This was a corner of space where real people got pushed around while others sipped drinks and looked the other way. Mazath approached quietly, his voice low but firm. "If you act," he said, "it becomes your mess." His 6 eyes blinked in a slow rhythm, and Elias could tell the warning wasn't made from hostility. It was caution, maybe even concern. Elias gave a slow nod. "I understand," he replied, though his eyes never left the scene at the bar. Then it happened. The Grolic, growling something no translator bothered to capture, lashed out. His thick arm swept forward, claws open, striking the small Trelawney trader hard across the chest. The impact sent the trader flying backward, crashing into the hollow wall with a dull electric hum, before crumpling to the floor. The sound broke the silence like shattering glass. Elias didn't wait. "Now," he snapped, and his crew moved, as one. In a blink, they crossed the room. No weapons drawn, no blasters fired. Just fists, precision, and years of training. Kira reached the Grolic first, ducking under a wild swing and slamming her shoulder into his midsection, throwing him off balance. Briggs followed with a sharp kick to the back of the knees, sending the towering alien stumbling. Elias and Juno circled around, each landing swift, controlled blows. It wasn't just brute force, it was practiced teamwork, like a drill or a dance. The Grolic roared, tried to grab one of them, but the humans were fast, dodging, striking, never giving him a clear target. The rest of the bar watched in stunned silence. Most had never seen combat without weapons, had never imagined someone would fight for someone else with no profit, no political gain, just because it felt right. The humans didn't shout, didn't boast, didn't hesitate. Their movements were clean and focused. Even when the Grolic threw a table, nearly smashing a light fixture, they adapted, regrouped, and pressed on until finally the massive alien fell to his knees, gasping, no longer a threat. Elias stepped back, breathing heavily, and looked around. Not a single glass had been lifted. No one else had moved. Eyes of all shapes and colors stared at him and his crew. The room had gone silent again, but now it was a different kind of quiet, curious, maybe even respectful. The Trelawney trader sat on the floor, dazed but unharmed. And then, slowly, Mazath stepped out from behind the bar. He walked toward the humans, eyes never blinking, arms folded across his chest. The silence stretched. Elias waited for a warning, maybe even an order to leave. But instead, Mazath stopped just a few steps away, looked at the fallen Grolic, then back at the crew. His voice when he spoke was calm and clear. "Thank you," he said. Just 2 words, but in the dust bar, that meant everything. News of the bar fight at Viralon outpost spread faster than any ship could travel, reaching the heart of the Galactic Accord within a day. What shocked the galaxy wasn't that a fight had broken out. Those happened now and then, despite the rules, but that humans had been at the center of it, not starting the trouble, but stepping in without hesitation to stop it. Footage leaked from bar security, showing the moment Captain Elias Granger and his crew moved with practiced ease to defend the small Trelawney trader. The video went viral on every interstellar network, played over and over again, analyzed by alien commentators who had no idea what to make of it. Why didn't the humans call for help? Why didn't they follow protocol? Why did they act like it was personal? When it was revealed that the Trelawney traitor, Ki-Ir, was the son of a high-ranking Trelawney diplomat, the event took on a whole new meaning. The Galactic Accord called for a formal hearing, summoning the human crew to explain their actions. Some council members suspected Earth of trying to create a spectacle to gain sympathy and full membership. Others whispered that humans were too emotional to be trusted with high-level diplomacy. Inside the Accord Hall, under its towering crystal dome, Elias and his crew stood before delegates from 37 star systems. Questions came quickly, sharp, cold, and full of suspicion. "Captain Granger," one delegate asked, "why did you not simply report the incident to security?" Another, blinking slowly, added, "Why place your crew in danger for a stranger?" Elias listened carefully, hands folded behind his back, then stepped forward when the questioning paused. His voice was steady, but something in his tone cut through the room like a quiet blade. "Because on Earth," he said, "we don't wait for someone else to do the right thing. We don't just stand by. You step in. That's what being human means." A murmur spread across the chamber. For a few moments, no one said anything. The words were simple, but the meaning carried weight. Unfamiliar and uncomfortable to many species raised in cultures where safety, caution, and detachment were considered wise. The council began to discuss possible sanctions for breaking neutral zone conduct, and though some supported the humans' intentions, others insisted that rules were rules. Just as the vote was about to begin, a new voice echoed through the chamber, clear, calm, and full of authority. It was Ki-Ir's father, High Diplomat Thelen of the Trelawney, stepping forward from the observer section. The council turned in surprise, not expecting him to speak. Dressed in silver ceremonial robes, Thelen walked to the center of the room and bowed slightly to the humans. "My son would not be alive without these people," he said simply. "They did what none of us did. They acted when it mattered, without needing a reason beyond doing what was right. The Accord speaks of unity, but they showed it in practice, not just in words." He paused, letting the silence settle. Then he added, "If these are the humans you fear, then perhaps what you fear is change." The chamber fell into a heavy hush. Elias looked at his crew, each of them standing tall, saying nothing but knowing something had shifted in that moment. The council members exchanged glances, unsure how to respond, and the scheduled vote was quietly delayed. Outside the hall, news of the diplomat's words spread as quickly as the original fight, and many began to wonder if this wasn't just a story about humans, but about how courage might look different from what they were used to. But even as the humans left the chamber, thinking they had earned a moment of peace, a message was already being sent in secret by a group of uneasy council members who had no interest in humans becoming full members of the Accord. Plans were forming, and the crew of the UHS Resolute had no idea what storm was coming next. The announcement came 2 days after the hearing, broadcast across all major Accord channels. The Trelawney diplomat had officially petitioned for Earth's full membership in the Galactic Accord, calling the actions of Captain Elias Granger and his crew an example of heroic defiance in the face of passive failure. It sent ripples across the galaxy. While many praised the humans for their bravery, not all celebrated. Some of the older and more powerful species, long used to a slow, careful balance of politics, began to worry. To them, humans were unpredictable, too fast to act, too loyal to causes without clear reward, and worst of all, too inspiring to others. Quiet meetings were held behind closed doors. Whispered agreements were made, and somewhere far from the main Accord systems, a contract was signed. Unnamed clients hiring a crew of mercenaries known for making problems disappear. Their mission was simple: make the humans rethink their place in this galaxy. Back at Viralone, outpost unaware of the storm forming, Elias and his crew returned to the dust bar one last time to gather their belongings and say goodbye. The atmosphere felt different now. Where once they had been watched with suspicion, now they were greeted with nods, even small smiles from species who would never have spoken to them before. Mazath gave them a quiet nod from behind the counter, his 6 eyes observing every movement, as always. The crew laughed over a final round of drinks, talking about what full Accord status might mean for Earth and where they might go next. But as they left the bar and headed toward the docking bay, the lights above flickered, not from a power surge, but from a system override. The corridor darkened. Juno's hand moved to her side instinctively. "Did you feel that?" she asked. Before anyone could answer, the ambush began. From the shadows, armored figures emerged, not security, not pirates, but hired professionals. They moved fast and without warning, blasters drawn, voices silent. The humans were outnumbered and outgunned, pushed back step by step as red warning. Lights began to flash. Briggs took a stun bolt to the shoulder and dropped behind a crate, groaning. Kira pulled him back while Juno laid down cover fire using a tool rig instead of a weapon. Elias made the call instantly. "Fall back to the bar." They retreated, moving fast and low, until the doors of the dust bar slid open and they burst inside. The music stopped. All conversation froze. Every patron turned to look as the injured and breathless crew stumbled in, weapons behind them still firing. Elias raised his voice, hoarse but steady. "We're under attack. Not thieves, not raiders. Hired guns." Behind him, the attackers approached. But just as they reached the threshold, Mazath moved. With one slow, deliberate step, the towering barkeep placed himself between the humans and the door. His many arms reached out, not for weapons but for the heavy steel levers mounted beside the entry frame. One by one he pulled them. The lights in the bar dimmed to red, shields hummed to life. Emergency shutters slid into place with a sharp hiss. The attackers skidded to a halt, their sensors confused by the sudden field disruption. And then, in the heavy silence, Mazath spoke, not loud, but with a voice that left no room for question. "Nobody messes with the bar, or the humans." Behind him, other patrons stood up. A Talon reached for the curved blade strapped to his back. A Greylick miner cracked his knuckles. Even the quiet Lauren trader unfolded long arms from his robes, ready. The attackers hesitated. They had expected a simple mission: frighten, wound, maybe capture. What they hadn't expected was that the humans weren't just visitors anymore. They were part of something. And the dust bar protected its own. The moment the last emergency shield clicked into place, silence held the dust bar for a heartbeat, but only a heartbeat. Then the mercenaries stepped forward, clearly thinking they still had the upper hand. But as their weapons sparked and shorted in their hands, disabled by the bar's old but powerful anti-tech field, they realized the rules had changed. What followed was not just a fight, but a storm. Not humans versus aliens, but defenders against intruders. The dust bar erupted into chaos, yet not the kind that scattered people. This was the chaos of unity, of species who had nothing in common choosing to fight side by side. Elias led with a solid punch that caught a mercenary mid-charge, and beside him, a Talon spun with a dancer's grace, slashing through the air with his twin blades. Juno and Kira worked in sync, flanking a hulking attacker, dodging blows with practiced timing. Briggs, still clutching his shoulder, laughed through the pain as he swung a broken stool like a club. The regulars joined without hesitation. The Lauren trader, silent and calm, used his long limbs to trip and twist enemies to the floor. Mazath moved like a boulder with intent, lifting two attackers at once and slamming them into the counter before calmly reaching for a fresh mug. Even the Trelawney, not known for combat, shouted in defiance as they pulled one of the wounded humans to safety. The mercenaries were skilled, but they had not prepared for this. Species of different sizes, strengths, and shapes, fighting together without orders. Only trust. They had expected humans to be alone, to be easy targets. Instead, they found themselves facing a wall of fists, claws, tentacles, and fury. Chairs flew, tables shattered, beverages spilled and mixed with sparks on the floor. But no one cared. No one ran. The bar became a battleground of strange alliances and unexpected bravery. By the time the last mercenary was thrown out through the back hatch, limping and dazed, the dust bar looked like a disaster zone, but everyone inside stood taller. Breathing hard, bruised, and bleeding, the humans were surrounded not by strangers but by friends, earned not through treaties or trade, but through action. In the days that followed, the story swept through the stars again, stronger than before. News feeds replayed the fight with dramatic music, and interviews rolled in from species who spoke of what they'd seen, not just the violence, but the way the humans had fought with and for others. When the Accord Council met again, there was no long debate. The vote was nearly unanimous. Earth was granted full membership into the Galactic Accord, not only for the bravery of its people, but for their unshakable loyalty to principle and ally alike, as one counselor said. The dust bar became more than a place to rest and drink. It became a symbol, a legend retold in every language across space. In time, a plaque was mounted above the door, made from a piece of salvaged hull metal from the UHS Resolute, etched in every known tongue. No one drinks alone. On a quiet evening not long after, with the bar cleaned up and the lights low, Elias sat at the counter with Mazath. Around them, laughter and music filled the room again, a mix of voices and accents, species once divided now swapping stories, and raising glasses together. Mazath poured 2 drinks and slid one to Elias, who raised it with a tired but genuine smile. "To bar fights," Elias said, tapping his glass gently against Mazath's, "and better friends." The six-eyed bartender allowed himself a rare grin. And for the first time in a long time, the dust bar felt like the center of something, far bigger than a neutral zone. It felt like the future, loud, messy, united,